Let me also, I'll keep Photoshop open. I might have stuff needed for it later. Blah, 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 blah. There we go. Turn that off, turn that off. So, back onto the actual topic we had today. So, previous stream, we were going through Tales of the Old West, which is a Western TTRPG made by Effekt Games using the Year Zero engine, which if you're familiar with like TTRPGs from Free League, it's very similar to their book. So if you're familiar with like the Aliens TTRPG or the Blade Runner TTRPG or Mutant Year Zero, it's a very similar system. It uses a number of D6s in a pool of dice. You roll. If you get a 6, you succeed. If you get more 6s, you do other stuff. If you roll a 1, bad things happen. So the previous session, we went through like some of the basics of like how the system runs and character creation and like some other stuff. And like some of the talents as well. So that was all last session. So that YouTube video is now on the channel. It should also still be on the VOD. So we have all of that. And so today we are going to be continuing this by continuing right where we left off. So I left off covering damage. So we're going to recover that damage and like me explaining how your character can be in situations where they take harm and how that harm builds up. With some examples of play and examples of danger. And also we will be covering the other stuff such as your critical injuries you can sustain in the game, as well as any like ailments and conditions you can get and stuff of the sort. So we will be going through some diseases and some illnesses. We're going through poison, we're going through dehydration, exhaustion, and how that affects your characters during scenes and during play. And then we will be talking about capitalism, because that is also a core component of this game if you want to play a humble person coming to the West to basically make a new life and like make their way and make their money and make their living. You might want to just make a business or get a farm or get a job, and that is what you can do in Tales of the Old West. So we'll be covering this now here. So let me get my drawing tool. There we go. So we covered damage a bit last turn. Is basically you have 4 specific health bars. So if we go here and we pull up our character that we made last session, we have Barry. This is Barry. He is a tracker by trade or by archetype, and he is also a cowboy. And he has his talents here. So as you can see here, he has underneath each of his attributes a number of things. So he has underneath his grit, he has hurts. Hurts is your physical damage. So hurts is very much your physical health bar. So when you take a point of damage to your hurts, it is very much like a bruise, a graze, physical damage you are sustaining. If you take all of your hurts, you are unconscious. Or you're in so much pain that you can't move. Another thing of note is when you take damage, your corresponding attribute also goes down. So taking damage will also weaken your ability to roll better. If we continue from that, quicks. So quicks is shakes. It's very much what its name is. But as you take damage to shakes, you are being shaken up, which will stop you in your tracks, make your more dexterous moves harder to do, cause you to fumble. And like as you're fumbling, you may like drop your gun or slip and trip or not be able to like finagle a little code or something. So as you're taking damage to shakes, which is a bit more your edge, as you take damage to that, you will lose your quicks, meaning your ability to move, operate, shoot, and be light-fingered will go down. And they correspond with physical, so shakes and hurts are shed. and we'll cover how that shared damage bleeds into one another later. Now for your social, you have Cunning. So Cunning's health bar is called Vex's, and while not being like physically affecting you, it's more your irritability. So as you're taking damage to Vex's, you are getting more irritated at the situation. It's causing you to trip up and miss things, and like not be able to like read people, or not be able to like understand stuff, or handle an animal because the animal can tell that you're losing your patience. It is very much your patience. So if you lose all of your X's and you're maxed out, you are essentially not out of the game, but you cannot like be spoken to or have a conversation with people without being incredibly irritated. That irritation really showing. So you are incredibly snappy when you are like in this situation. So it's a situation you want to avoid because you are literally just snapping at people and like being irritable, which will affect your standing and kind of cause your mask to fall or your face to slip and change people's perspectives of you. And that is Effekt. And Docility is doubts, and this is very much your internal perspective of yourself and your ability to think that you can do things. So this your doubt very much affects like what you can do, how you can perform, what you can make. It's more like your motivation to keep going forward and your motivation to make things or learn things. Like when you lose all your doubts, you are literally all of your self-esteem is gone. You have literally no doubt that you can actually like continue with stuff. And that's how that goes. So these are your health bars. So when you're in a situation where you are actually going to take damage, so say for example, you take a bout of physical damage. So say Barry here gets into a scuffle with one guy at a bar, and he throws they get into a little spat, like socially, they get into a little argument, and basically, like during the social encounter, it doesn't go in Barry's favor, so Barry takes some damage to like social stuff. So let's say he takes 1 point into his Vexes as like he's tripping on his words and social standing, and like people are looking now and seeing like, hey, that guy got chat down to, that guy looks like an idiot. And now Barry feels like, okay, now them's fighting ones, we're gonna fight now. And like he throws a punch at this guy, hits the other guy, they take damage, but then he gets hit with a punch. Now he got hit with a very heavy punch, he's gonna take more than just 1 point of damage. He's gonna take, say, 3 points of damage. So you usually will determine what point of damage gets hit first. So because this is a physical hit and he's getting punched in the face, he's going to take 1 damage to his hurt. Now, because he's taking 3 points of damage, he doesn't take the next one to his hurt, and like he doesn't take 3 points to his hurt. Hey Selma, how's it going? Yep. So welcome. So you wouldn't take damage to like hurts right away because you've only got 3 HP of hurts. So no, don't worry. I need to get into the habit of understanding chat. Anyway, welcome. We are currently discussing Tales of the Old West, which is a Western TTRPG. I don't think I really need to explain who I am to you, Selma. My sheep sister who was very much astray and into the very occult stuff. But let us continue. So, yes, you are astray. But yeah. How dare you make me a cultist? For like 3 days. Because we couldn't get a session in where I could spend that coupon. Yeah. But yeah. So, you wouldn't take 3 points to your hurts right away. Because literally by taking 3 points to your hurts, you are unconscious. But so how damage in Tales of the Old West is done instead is it is traded between your 2 physical abilities. So you have hurts and shakes, they are your physical. So when you take damage to hurts, that's 1 point. You then take your next damage to shakes, and then to hurts after that. And so Barry who got his kind of got his self-esteem hit a bit with Vex's from the conversation with the other cowboy, and then got hit with a punch. He got hit pretty bad, but then I was kind of like left shaken and stunned by the blow. But he goes back and forth, but he's not out yet. Obviously, if he tries to fight more, he's only got 1 point in grits, so he's not going to have many dice rolls to this. But as things continue, if he was to take one more punch, he would be knocked out cold. Now, fortunately, you don't have to worry about these hits, shakes, vexes, and doubts lasting an entire session. So long as you spend a scene, or like 5 or 10 minutes, not doing strenuous strenuous activities, and like you're just resting, you will immediately heal all of your hurt, shakes, vexes, and doubts. It will go back to 0. Now, let's say you do take a ton of damage and you get hit again. You are actually going to get hit pretty bad, and you are going to basically sustain a critical injury. And when you take a critical injury, that is a very long-lasting thing that can happen to you, depending on what the critical injury is. So, if we go back to our PDF view, so I've covered the damage now on how that can transition. Now we cover critical injuries. So we go through to this. Critical injuries usually can be sustained when someone either calls a specific shot on you, you take a shot, or someone rolls dice against you, and they can basically score a crit score on like their weapons crit rating, or you are hit while you are down. Say, for example, Barry's situation, he was hit when he was down, so he's going to sustain a critical injury. They can be cured long term with some doctoring, depending on what critical injury you see. But also, an immediate effect is applied. That will take time to heal. So in this case, Barry is stunned. A stunned character is unable to act due to the pain they or shock they're in from the critical injury. So if they're hit with a critical injury, they are going to be stunned, and they have to make a resilience roll. Depending on how many hits they take with a resilience roll will determine how many rounds they're basically out for, because literally, they've sustained a critical injury. Depending on how bad that critical injury is, it will be very much bad. They can like break their arm, they can break their leg, they can literally get a punctured lung, or they could just instantly die, depending on how the dice roll. So, yeah. And that's when you start like taking death saves. There are some non-typical types of harm, but for now, we are actually going to roll a critical injury, because we're going to say Barry, in his fight with the other cowboy, had a nasty trip. And let's roll and see what critical injury he got. So Barry here rolled and shattered his shin bone. Not the brightest move here, Barry. So Barry, let's say he threw a punch, and then as he went, he lost his footing and literally stamped a little too hard on the wooden boards and caused it to shatter and broke his shin. So, is it fatal? Is the shattered shin bone fatal? No. So, it isn't an immediate threat to his life. How long will this take to heal? It's going to take Barry 7 weeks to heal from his shattered shin. Now, the immediate effect is he's stunned for 2 rounds, he can't ride, run or move, and walks at half speed. Long-term effect. So, if this doesn't get treated, he could lose the lower leg. So, that's something you've got to consider. You can just lose your leg. if it's not treated properly. Very bad idea of throwing that punch, Barry. We will have better things for you in the future. Because again, you have to be, again, the game can be very brutal with critical injuries. You very much can be a player who's like loses a hand after the first session. Or, we will cover it later, you can literally just fall off your horse and die in this game. It is a very sim kind of TTRPG in that sense. So yeah, so you take that. So we covered that and we covered critical injuries. There are also like non-typical types of harm, which is your conditions. So these are things that you can get during playing Tales of the Wild West because as time passes, yeah, just have a lot of backup characters. Yeah, that's usually the way you go about it. Like have 6 characters ready, or get very familiar with just rolling to make a new character. Or RP out that you no longer have a leg. And have crutches, and use those crutches as a weapon. But yeah, so we have some conditions. There are 5 conditions in this game. We will first cover starving. So, because of the length of this game, in times and like basically how time can pass, you can get very hungry, especially if you don't have enough rations. Yep, get a peg leg. Yes. So, if you don't eat your mutton, you may starve. So, if you have any sheep on your farm, it may be considered rationing them. So, once you get the starving condition, you can't regain grit. So, as you take damage to your hurts and your grit, you don't recover it. It's a sign of you getting weaker. So, as you are recovering from your grit, you also suffer 1 point of hurt per week. So, as you start starving and you don't get a proper meal, you will start taking damage throughout the week that does not regenerate. If your grit is broken while starving, you have to make a death saving roll. Then 1 every week without food until you find food or die. As soon as you've eaten a good meal, you're no longer starving and you can recover grit normally. So you need to eat. You need to eat food. And then for some reason we go straight into critical injuries. So here are some examples of. So we have some examples of critical injuries here. So again, we start. How it's rolled is a d6 roll. So you would roll d6, and depending on the roll that you get, it can either be a lower leg injury, like something as simple as a twisted ankle. Again, we had our shattered shin bone, so we rolled a 1 and a 6. Then we get to like the upper leg, and how that can affect us. Then we go to our arms, our gut, which can go so far from just being sucker punched to us literally having a ruptured spleen or a gut shot. It can be very lethal. So this is where we go about saying, like, is this wound fatal? And it's basically, you have d6 days to basically get it treated by a doctor, or your character dies. So that with a ruptured spleen, you have d6 days. If you got gut shot, you have d6 turns to get it treated. And then you literally have rounds if you get the worst. And then similar things for the chest. Some are lethal, some are non-lethal, some are instant. So if you roll a 56 or a 66, you will get what is considered the instant death, where you get cut through the heart, or you get hit in the head terribly. So those are the 2 rolls you have to avoid when taking a critical injury. And then for some reason we move away from the cut through the heart and you're too late. Yes, exactly that, Selma. So we do that, we cover that. You give love a bad name. Yeah. See, so next up we cover dehydration. So if you don't get water, you die. I'm sorry to break it to you, you poor little mortals. I don't suffer from this because I am robot. So you have to drink at least 1 ration of water at least once per day. A day without water and you become dehydrated. So with this, you can't recover any attributes until you drink water. And you start taking 1 point to both hurts and shakes until you do. If you don't, you die of thirst. Enough said. Next up is, yes, hydrate. If you don't hydrate, you dihydrate. Is the lesson you should learn. So, when you're exhausted, and this is something I actually very like in the book, because you would think exhaustion would just be physical. No. So, you need at least 1 sleep per shift. So, a shift is 6 hours, so you need at least to sleep 1 shift, so you need to at least sleep 6 hours a day. After 1 day without sleep, you will become exhausted and get the exhausted condition. You cannot recover docility or cunning. You take 1 point of doubts and vexes each day. If either docility or cunning is broken while exhausted, you collapse and immediately sleep for a full shift. So again, this isn't a death sentence, you just pass out. As soon as you fall asleep for a full shift, you're no longer exhausted, and you can recover normally. So for this, you are literally just going without sleep until you pass out. So for Brian, or for Barry can go a bit without sleep. So Barry could essentially go like 2 to 3 days without sleep. Yeah, if you're on the side of a cliff when it happens, then we do a lot of rolling. We'll cover fall damage in a moment as well, because fall damage is also mentioned in this game. So with that, I like that it is actually affecting your social aspect rather than your physical, because exhaustion and like exhausting activities may affect you physically, but it's your mental capacity to carry them on that stops you, rather than you just literally doing it until you crash out. As someone who has gone through many times of not sleeping for days, I can relate. So, next up, let's cover freezing. So, being outdoors without proper like warm clothes during like a winter, you cannot recover your grit or cunning. And you have to make a resilience check when you're outside. As it gets colder, you have to frequently make these resilience rolls. If it's above freezing, once per day is enough. In sub-zero temperatures, you roll once per 6, so you have to roll once every 6 hours. If you're in freezing temperatures for like 6 hours. If you fail your resilience check, you take 1 point to your hurts and vexes. And eventually, if you keep failing these until you become broken, you freeze to death. If you fail your death save as well. So yes, wear warm clothes, even in Western climates. Or you will become a popsicle. Now moving on from freezing, we do have heat stroke. This is the Old West. Yay, welcome. Thank you for your subscription, Selma. Thank you very much. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Enjoy your time at the theatre. Welcome to your time at the theatre. We will now reserve your special seat. I don't get your soul either. True. We have prime souls. Souls above being a normal human being. Yes. Heat stroke. You're out in the sun all day. It's really going to get to you. This more is a case of you suffer the effects of troubles on all rolls, not just pushed rolls. So it's going to affect your performance in rolling regardless. You need to make a resilience check or you start taking damage. If you don't find shade, you will have to start making death saves because you're suffering from hypothermia. Moving on from that, so those are the conditions you can get in the game. Now, something that could happen to you is you could be set on fire. You should not be set on fire in this game. Depending on the intensity of the fire, you will be having dice rolled against you when you're exposed to it. Usually you are having 8 dice rolled against you. So you might need a check to like avoid that damage or like negate that damage, but you're always having a lot of dice rolled against you, and basically 6s will deal damage. And if you take that damage, you catch fire and become burned. Which means you suffer another attack at the start of each round while you're on fire, with the intensity increasing. So, say you are avoiding fire at first. You have to roll to avoid the fire. Let us go back to Barry. Barry is going to be set on fire for this educational purpose. So, here we have Barry. Barry is going to be set on fire. So we'll make sure Barry is nice and healthy before we're setting him on fire. So we're going to set Barry on fire. This means we are going to roll 8d6. So we rolled 8d6. We got 2 6s. So we're going to say Barry is going to make a resilience check. He needed 2 successes. Unfortunately, he didn't get any successes, and he's not going to push the roll. So Barry is on fire. So Barry's going to take 2 points of damage to his hurts and shakes because he's on fire and he took those 2 points of damage. He didn't negate any in any capacity. So if he rolled 1 6, he would have still been on fire, but now would have only taken 1 point of damage. Now, Barry is unfortunately going to be making a roll against 9 dice. Now, with those 9 dice rolled, he has to beat 2 6s again. Barry makes a resilience check. Barry rolled 1 6 and also 1 trouble. He's going to first buy off that trouble. He's then going to try and push the roll. And rolled to get a critical success with some trouble. So, yay! Barry's no longer on fire. Barry's no longer on fire. However, we have to roll trouble for Barry. So, we had to roll the trouble on the conflict page, and he loses the d6 on the pool. Fortunately, Barry was boss, because Barry rolled 4 6s. So, even with that 1 6 being gone, he still managed to put himself out. So, yay! Barry was only on fire for 1 turn and took 2 points of damage. Good job, Barry. And that's how fire works. And then once you're on fire, you still have burns, and you have to be treated by a doctor. Dynamite. Similar to fire, the blast of it can be 8 to 12 dice, and can be as powerful as 16 dice. So if you're in the blast radius, that's the amount of damage coming your way. So, hey, Barry, Catch this dynamite. So, Barry, after healing up from being on fire, is now going to be causing an explosion. He's going to take 10 points. He's going to be taking 4 points of damage. He can try and move out the way. So, he moved out of the way and will instead only be taking 3 points of damage by reducing one of the sixes with his own success. So, good job, Barry. Let's just ignore that fighting roll. You can't fight an explosion, Barry. So yeah, Barry is going to take 3 points of damage. We're going to say he's going to take that point to his hurts. He's going to take it to his shakes. And then he's going to take that point to his hurts again. Now, unfortunately, I believe Dynamite has a crit. Has crits. But let's find out. Okay, so it doesn't seem like Dynamite has crits. So we're lucky there. Barry did not get exploded. Oh, never mind. You suffer 2 points. Or if he was closer, he would have died, because he would have suffered 2 points per damage instead of 1. And as the GM, I may impose a critical injury as the radius of explosions. So we'll say Barry wasn't within arm's length of that explosions and got out fine. I'm not a monster. Barry is required for more experimentations and simulations. So next up, we cover falling. So falling is exactly what it says on the tin, which you've just dropped off the shelf. So falling onto a hard surface inflicts an amount of damage based from the height you've fallen, divided by 2, rounding all fractions down. You can do a move roll to reduce the damage you take from this check. Each success removing the damage by 1. I may also impose a critical injury from the damage you take. We will not have Barry falling for this sit. I believe this basically kind of like sums itself up, as opposed to falling from a horse. So if you're riding a horse and you fail a check and the horse is going to buck you off, it is considered an 8 dice attack, similar to fire. However, this does have a damage rating. So this has a damage rating of 1, but also this has a critical rating of 2. So we will say Barry is going to be falling off his horse. You don't have a horse for him to fall off of right now, so we're going to say we're going to put him on a bull instead. So Barry is on a bull. He's at a radio. He's riding that bull. He gets bucked off. He's going to take that 8 points of damage. So we're going to roll 8d6. That's 2 points of damage. He gets to then make a move. Okay, so he rolls trouble. He's going to buy off the 2 trouble. So he's going to buy off the 2 trouble. But lacks the faith. It's a reroll. So he's going to take 2 points of damage. Because he took 2 points, because he took 2, and the crit rating is 2, he's actually avoided a critical injury. So you have to spend dice to do critical injuries. So because there's only 1 extra dice from the success to do the crit, he's fine. At least that's what I think. I'm pretty sure most guns have a crit rating of 2. So that may be how it is. But I could also be wrong. I'm assuming I'm on the idea that you spend that 1 success to actually be counting as the hit, and then you have your extra 6s that you can use to spend on stunts. So, with that, we move on to drowning. Hey Barry, I need you to stand by this river. Nah, we're fine. So again, when you're swimming or out in the water, you need to make a labor roll to stay afloat. We're under the assumption Barry can swim. If you start sinking, you have to make a resilience check to keep your breath held. And if you fail to hold your breath, you suffer 1 point of damage to your hurt for every round until someone saves you. So if you're drowning, you can no longer be saved, which is something to kind of be considered. And so basically, the moment you die, or the moment you're drowning, the kind of like sonic drowning music starts playing until another player comes and rescues you. And that's drowning. Next up, we have venom and poison. So, venoms and poisons have a potency level, usually of 1, 2, 3, and very rarely 4. An all potency of 1 is normally poisons have a potency of 1, although strong poisons have a potency of 2. Extreme poisons have a potency of 3. So when you are poisoned, you have to make a resilience check. So in order to fight off the potency of the poison, you have to make a resilience check. You have to beat the number of the potency. So say we gave this nice little dose of snake bite to Barry, and Barry takes 2 potency. He has to roll a resilience check and get 2 successes in order to not be poisoned. If he does get poisoned, he takes 1 point of hurt each, basically 1 point of hurt each round, turn, or shift, depending on how fast that thing the poison is, until they're broken. Now, you can treat that. Barry gets his salary. He signed up for this. We will swap to the other character, Tom, later, for fairness. So yeah, you have to treat that poison with a doctor check, otherwise you're literally just going to die. Now obviously you can get poisons that paralyze you, we can get poisons that put you to sleep. We can mix poisons as well with doctoring checks, which will all affect the potency of what we're doing. So if we wanted to be a poison assassin or use poison darts, we could. And each affect you in different ways. Next we have diseases. So obviously, you're out in the west. You are going to eventually catch some things in the west. Each disease has a measured by a virulence level of 1, 2, or 3. Very rarely there would be 4. So when exposed to a dangerous contagion or infection, you need to roll a resilience check against this level. If you fail it, you are sick. And basically, after being infected for 1 day, you start taking damage to your hurt and shakes. You need to be treated by a doctor, because you can't recover grit, or quick, or sick. And you have to make a sickness roll once per day. And eventually you can die. And you require medical aid, or medicine, to treat any illnesses. So for example, we have some examples of some diseases here, as well as their virulence level. So we have like cholera, which is virulent, is 2. You have consumption, aka tuberculosis, which is 1, but you roll this once per week for the rest of the game. So you were literally in a ticking time clock if you get a tuberculosis roll. Again, and there's other ones as well. Not so much a condition of like that can harm you, so we can put Barry in a dark room It'll just give him a -3 penalty to his Hawkeye. And he can't really do anything, so he's kind of doing things with -3. But I'm sure Dari would appreciate being left in a dark room for like 6 hours. Not being allowed to sleep. And yeah, so that is damage in Tales of the Old West. So what have we learned? We have learned that I am very cruel to Barry and I'm probably going to get sued. But aside from that, we have learned that 1, you very rarely take damage to the same attribute and is more traded between your physical attributes and your social, depending on the type of damage you are taking. We are aware of conditions and how they affect us, and we are also aware of poisons and diseases and how we should best avoid them. As the game plays longer courses of like going days to weeks, rather than you playing the scenes verbatim, they can play a very important role to your Wild West campaign. Now, let us cover our life in the Old West. So, this is the part where we learn about capitalism. So, money. We obviously use the dollar in the Wild West campaign. So money is managed by our dollar level. So as our characters make money, you will have a number of dollars. But we will also get capital. Capital is not so much cold hard cash. It is your assets. It is your... Basically, it is your real estate. It is the stuff you have in the bank. Capital is how you actually go about purchasing major projects, while cash is used to basically purchase your day-to-day living. Cash can be turned into capital, and capital can be turned into cash. Now, with cash, if your character has enough cash to convert into capital, which is usually $250, so every $250 becomes 1 capital. When you have 1 capital, you can spend that 1 capital to invest in something. So you need capital to actually do stuff in the world. And you do that by literally investing that capital into the economy, into a business, whether or not it's a business you own or a business someone else owns. So you could say you want to invest into your local baker's bakery to get him like really starting off. You can basically put 1 point of capital in that baker's business as a means of like just investment, and you, depending on how that bakery performs, you may get a return on that. You can also make your own business. So say you want to make a laundry business. Say specifically, you want to trade in sheep. Or more specifically, trade in wool. You can spend 1 point of capital and maybe some extra and saying like stuff like to buy a farm or buy like a place to keep your sheep and pens and like shearing equipment. Eventually that can turn into a sheep business. That could eventually earn money. So gaining capital, you gain capital by working very hard or stealing that money if you want to play a criminal. And then you turning that cold hard $250 into capital. You can use it to start investing in businesses and an outfit, buying and improving your own property, or liquidating capital into cash. Now, if you want to start investing to a business, you first need to find the business outfit that you want to invest in. We mentioned the bakery. Putting 1 capital in that means you have 1 capital invested in that business. You can take that capital out of that business at any time, but it means you are no longer invested in that business. So, or you can create your own outfit and you are considered basically the proprietor of that outfit, of that business. So say Selma is the proud owner of the ship rearing business. You are the proprietor. You own that business. Other people or other players can spend their capital to invest in your business. And basically with the amount of points and capital in that business, it can operate better, it has more money to go with, and stuff like that. So you can improve a property or improve a business by pouring capital into it, which could improve its turnout. But again, you can turn capital back into cash. This is done at a reduced rate. So you are always taking a risk when turning your capital into cash again, but it's the only way to turn your capital back into cash. So if you have no money and you need to pay someone back, you need to take that capital out, convert it back to cash, and pay it. So you have to liquidate your assets if you want to actually pay off your debts. You roll, when you want to liquidate your capital, you take one capital out, you go to the bank, and you roll a d6. You multiply that result by $50, and that is how much money you will get back from that capital. Now, remember, unless certain circumstances are different, you are paying $250 for capital. Meaning, if you want to turn that capital back into cash, you need to roll a 5 to break even. If you roll a 6, then obviously you make $50 more than what you put into it. So, let's go gambling. We will cover gambling in later. And that is the current value. Now, this is basically a liquidate your capital if you really need the cash and you can't get that cash in other means. So we have an example of capitalism in action. So, Nadija has come into some money and decides to turn it into points of capital and invest it in the local town bakery. She converts $500 into 2 capital points at $250 each, and now has a nice stake in the outfit. The bakery does well, and as a shareholder, the shares in profit generated by the business. However, sometime later, she builds up a debt of $250, playing cards, and has no way of paying it. To settle this debt, she decides to liquidate her investment in the bakery. She takes 1 point of capital, leaving 1 invested in the business. She rolls a d6 to liquidate the capital and rolls a 2. So her first point of liquidated capital is $100. Not enough to pay off her debt. So she is forced to liquidate her second point as well. This time she rolls a 6 and she makes $300. So she's able to pay off that debt and have $150 left over, but she has no more investment in the bakery. And that is how that works. So, taking capital out and liquidating it should be a last resort. So how can you get capital in a world when you start off with no money? Or start off with nothing but the dollars in your pocket? You can take out a loan with your bank. So, if the GM approves, you can take out a loan of a certain amount of cash, which can then be turned into capital. The GM and the players would most likely discuss the terms of when that has to be paid back, and also the percentage in which that has to be paid back. So, banks in the 1870s were not the solid proposition they might have seemed. Sometimes banks were established by frauders. So one thing you have to worry about is the bank you're working with to get this loan sketchy as fuck? That is up to me as the GM. Or if any other player wants to GM this. Or say you want to be players who rob the bank and scam the people. Maybe your outfit is to become a bank or a loan agency. Maybe you want to become the villains of capitalism. Which is where you begin your life in this town. So, this is also something that is basically based on capital or the money you're putting in. So where do you live in town? You can decide where you live in town and what you do. So say you find a town and you want to live there. You want to make a life there. You don't want to start off with a business or a farm. You want to start off as like just some literal like townsfolk. You can find employment. Now, when you want to find a job, or you decide with the GM what job your character has, you get your salary once every 3 months. So once per season, you get your salary. I decide the exact amount in the game, but I have a nice little table here of giving me stuff. 25% comes off of that if you have a place to sleep with your job. So we have some job examples here. So say you work for the private army. Now this one does include your food and board, and you get paid $75 per season. If you're a baker, you get $75 per season, but you lose 25% if you want to live in the bakery. Same if you're a barkeep, and so on and so forth. If you were a nice swanky job and you were a deputy marshal, $200 per season is not too bad. Probably has a lot of sessions before you get to that, but yeah, still nice. Now, there is an exception to this. And that is if you want to be a preacher. So, you do see here that being a preacher as a retained preacher, which means you are a contracted preacher. Is that. But if you're a preacher, you are basically making your money based on the actual roles you're making. So your social roles and stuff like that and how you're performing to your nice little church or cult will all depend on your performance as a preacher, and that then goes with how much money you make. Now, you could, at the favor of like a mayor, have a nice slanky church you can sleep in as you go and preach to the choir and hold sermons. But that is all depending on how charismatic and performing you are. Yes. Being a cultist is all fun and games until the taxman comes to collect Selma. Yes. Now, that is basically if you are wanting to work an honest job. Let's have a look at all of your nice swanky donations. You seem to have a nice swanky business in the fur trade and not the wool trade. Do you have some wolves in your establishment? Anyway, let me take a little sip because my throat is quite parched. Got some Sunny D. Right. Back on track. This would be where I take a little break and run an ad, but I also didn't run a pre-rolled ad at the start of the session, and I'm kind of lazy, so we will not have an ad break. I will also remember to timestamp, so I can better break up these stuffs for when I put this on YouTube. So, next up. So again, we mentioned earlier that you can put capital into creating your own business. This is done very differently. So when you create your outfit, you create your business. Meaning, when you start an outfit, you put one capital into a business, and you're the proprietor of that business. Anyone else after that who puts capital in your business is an investor, not a proprietor. You can also have people in your party or your posse as employees in your establishment. So you could run a bakery and own a bakery and hire your crew to work in that bakery. And they, depending on your work and roles, would earn money from working for you. So they would earn their wage. Businesses and outfits do play a background role in a campaign. They are not really like the forefront unless you want to make it the forefront. and you really want to do Business Simulator as like your Wild West campaign, in which case we kind of go into more of that and roleplay the everyday business of that. Usually in cases like this is like you'd go your like day to day, like you'd go for the campaign, and then when the campaign ends, we would like decide: do you go to work? Do we skip a season and you get your wages? Stuff like that. Now, you can basically make a business out of anything that within reason. So what kind of business you are is very much up to decide and discuss with your GM. So there are some business types tables, and what we get from here is, so we get the business, the key ability. So at the end of every season, you would have to make a roll to determine how successful your business was. And you have a desired prerequisite. So if you wanted to make a bakery, you need an oven. So you have a few examples of stuff from here. You can become a gunsmith if you want, but you need a forge. You don't really need anything for to become a handyman, so literally just purchase some tools and get a handyman business. Go around fixing people's porches. Or you could literally be a rancher with a farm. Or an undertaker. Get in the coffin making business. That for some reason is actually more performing because this is you doing funeral services. But you could just have your posse in your undertaking business being the ones who dig the graves. So you have that. So when you have this establishment, you do have a place of living for your employees. Yeah, no worries. Take care, Selma. Nice to see you drop by. So yeah, so you have your proprietor and you have your employees. Yes, Knight of the Garden. Welcome. So, here's a summary of Tales of the Old West. Tales of the Old West is a Wild West TTRPG made by Effekt Games. It is very much a down-to-earth kind of sim TTRPG of the Old West. So, like your 1860s to 1890s time frame of you basically playing someone in the Old West trying to go out and make their life. This system uses the Year Zero engine, which is familiar with some of the 3-week published games, and usually revolves around rolling a number of d6s, and 6s being successes, with some form of consequences if you roll a 1. Rolling is... there is a bit more of a grit to rolling, and there is a bit more of a oomph to failing. So, if you roll a 1, you will get what is considered trouble. And if you were to push a roll, which is re-rolling your dice pool to roll your checks, and you get another 1, you get trouble, you roll, something bad happens. I can give you a quick example of how rolling works. So if we go back to here, here is our little character sheet. So this is Barry. Barry is our tracker, cowboy. This is the Foundry VTT table for Tales of the Old West. It is not complete, but it is usable. So we have our sheet here. You have your 4 attributes. You have grit, quick, cunning, and docility. And all of them have their own health bars. And then you have a set of 4 skills per attribute, which will indicate your skills or your checks. So say, for example, you want to shoot a gun, which may affect your rolls with like a gun. So we do this. We say we're going to shoot at medium range, aim, fire, and we roll. Now, we rolled. Now, these first 5 dice are considered our trouble dice. If we rolled a 1 in any of these, then we would be in trouble if we were to push the roll. So we got 1 single 6, so we got a success. All you need to pass a check in most cases is a single 6. Usually in cases like this, the checks will be determined of like removing or adding dice. And that is how rolling is. It's not a D20 system. It's not really like D&D. It's got more of an action economy. Oh yeah, good Smurf, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Again, I've run a few one-shots of this so far. I want to go into more detail and like explanations of this, which is the purpose of. So these are my Let's Learn streams. These are streams where I will cover a TTRPG page to page as best I can from the perspective of a new player or a new GM learning a system. So I've already gone through part 1 of this TTRPG in a previous video on my YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com, YouTube in Cinder, you will find my YouTube channel there, and you will find a number of Let's Learns as I'm getting my hang of content creation. I am also getting into the habit of streaming here more consistently. So hello, essentially, I will be teaching people how to play any TTRPG that is not D&D or Pathfinder. I will be teaching. Anyway, let's just get back on track. So, boop, 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 boop. So, we've already gone to the idea of. So, we've gone through a bunch of things already. So, today we've gone through how damage can be applied and all the conditions and effects that we can get. And then we are currently learning about capitalism, because this TTRPG has a very nice business-esque system to it that's kind of meant to serve in the background, but can actually like become an entire campaign. Yeah, thanks. Again, I've been very start with my Twitch channel, so I very much thank you and welcome you back after like the 4th restructuring of my channel and what it becomes. Yeah, so welcome. Please enjoy your stay and enjoy your seat. I've kind of gone to a more theatre-esque thing, so you'll be seeing this more of my Let's Learn content and also some live plays of TTRPGs in the near future. I just need to kidnap more players. And back we go. So, we go to the idea of you can invest in a business if you want and create an outfit. You can have your players, if they also invest, or they're just be players. And you make your money from your business depending on like the roles you make. So like whether or not that character works for the business or draws a seasonal wage. Or like you can make money if the business does good. So if at the end of a season, you have to roll a business roll, which is the checks that we saw earlier. So these checks, to see how well the business does. Then, depending on how that roll goes and how many successes, we will either break even, and you will have enough money to pay all of your players who are being there as workers' wages, as well as basically not lose money. If you do well and you have more successes, you might make more money. And like if the business does good and you're an investor and not really doing any work into it, but you've paid the capital, you've paid the investment, you will get some return in cash as an investor. So that's where the business bonuses come away. So the only way for an investor to make money from their investment is if the business is doing very well and gets 2 or more successes. So if the business does well, you get money from your investment. So if you pour capital into every business, you will start seeing the money pour in if they do successful. But again, every business can experience losses. So as a business experiences losses, it means you're not going to have enough money to pay your workers and pay their wages. Also, you're going to lose money in the business. So capital might need to be liquidated to pay them back if things keep going bad. If you go bust, and that's if a business is reduced to 0 capital, because if you fail a check and it goes really bad, you will lose a point of capital. So if you have 0 capital, you go bust, meaning business gone, bye-bye. Everything that has already been priorly invested into that business is then liquidated. And basically all of it is liquidated in all of one go. And it's basically, if it's over the amount of debt you have to pay, then you have some money left over to invest in new things, but your business is gone. And that is capitalism in a nutshell. So next up, we cover a bit of property. So property is exactly what it says on the tin. It's where your character is living, where they are setting their base of operations and stuff of the sort. So there are a number of different things in Tales of the Old West that you can have as your established business, and it kind of revolves around your status and your reputation. So one, where you live at the get-go can determine your reputation and status. So say your character already lives in the swanky part of town. You already have that high reputation and high esteem about you because you're coming from good stock. But if like you live in the slums, your reputation and status is going to be a lot lower. So again, you can always be 0 status and have no home. Or you can live in a tent or a hut, and which don't require anything, just the cost of a tent and the cost of your dignity. But say you actually want a home, with 1 capital, so $250, you can get a small shack. You've just got to pay an extra $150 in cash and spend 6 weeks building your home. And that is the stuff for all of it. Now, you could buy someone else's home if you wanted, which is always an option. There is real estate. Again, Tales of the Old West, the 1860s. God, I wish that was me. I'd just gladly accept the tuberculosis to have a home for like 250 quid. So yeah. And again, obviously, like large extravagant homes are like 20 capital and cost a ton of money to build. Now, where your location property is would depend on your standing with the mayor and like your reputation. So you have this table here that goes like, hey, your town's in like the rough area, no one wants to live there. It's very available, but like literally prosperity is not great. Say you want to live in the town, it's good, but it's basically going to be very shady areas, or a lot of people are going to want those spots. But again, we live in the 1860s here in this TTRPG, and we have the exploitation of other people's land to profit from. We have the Homestead Act. So we will cover the Homestead Act in a minute because I believe it's on the next page. Yes, it is. It's right here. The Homestead Act. So the Homestead Act, enacted during the Civil War in 1862, provided any adult citizen who had never borne arms against the United States government could claim 160 acres of surveyed government land. Claimants were required to live on and improve their plot by building a home and cultivating the land. It cost just $14 to own 160 acres of land, with the caveat that they had to farm on it and had to build a business there for $14 to register a claim. Now, considering, yes, this was stolen land, this is the Tales of the Old West, and he does not care how the Homestead Act was supplied. Or that could be a point of contention for your campaign. Again, there's only so much land in the West. It is going to get eaten up. We are eventually going to end up in the shit show of 2025. Not in this TTRPG, but the future is there. So again, your home can have a number of features if you want to invest into it. So again, if you do use the Homestead Act and you want an animal run, you can get a few pigs for just $50. And you can make some money off of it with your animal handling rolls. And you can get a bunch of other things. So here's like a list of tables, like all the extra things you can get for your home. Like you can get stables. It's stuff to invest in your home, either if your home is your business or something else. Again, it's up to the GM and the players to decide where the starting property is. And like it gives examples of like the locations and stuff. So it is very much depending on the kind of campaign you're wanting to do. So like again, if you're playing a bunch of criminals, you're not really going to be living in town. You're going to be living like on the outskirts in tents. Your reputation is not going to be great in every single city because you're a new person there, and you're constantly going to be moving. If you're a new rancher in the area, your reputation is not going to be that great. Or say you inherit a ranch from someone, you may get the reputation that that previous rancher had. But that is very much how you set a campaign. We could play more in the campaign of like buying and selling property, which in some cases is basically buying the farmland from people, or auctions and bidding, which would be like downtime stuff if you had a lot of money, or like a session of a campaign of like going to an auction to buy land from swanky business people, or doing some kind of con. And again, this all reflects your reputation score. So your reputation is a mixture of your morals and the public spirit. So the public's opinion of you plus your own moral compass. Which again goes to your recognition of how people see you. Are you a celebrity? Are you scum? It all depends and stuff like that. And then we loop away from capitalism and back to something I thought would be there sooner. So we have our compadre. So when we create our character, we always make a few compadres who are NPC characters who either work with us or are just there. They are our compadres, they are our allies, they are our friendly NPCs. They are the people we can rely on or we can piss off and have them betray us later on. So when we create our compadre, we kind of decide who they are from like, usually there's something in like next to what we are or something of the sort. We then roll their attributes and then we have our compadre made. So for example, we have in our Tale of the Old West, we have Barry. Barry has a compadre as well as his partner Tom. Our little compadre is Dusty Wilcott, who has his own set of scats and his own gun. As well as his own like personalities and of the sort. In most cases, they are, depending on how the players treat their compadre, allies. And there's a few rollings of what they are and what they get and their skills. And then, for some reason, we then move from compadres to gear, which I didn't think we would do. I would think, and I'm going to scroll down, we would move to the next part of the important thing, your horse. So, you can, at the start of the game, select a horse. And they are of certain breeds, depending on what your class is. And you also roll for stats. And your horse is your companion. It is your friend. It is your steed that you have to consider. So I thought compadres and horses would kind of be together, but in the book it's not. And then we go to kind of like gear, which is very like generic, or like, hey, here's the gear you have and here's how much it costs. Here's what you can buy and here's how much it costs. And what it can do. You'd think this would be like near the back of the book, but no, it's kind of like slap bang in the middle. I'm not going to cover in great detail because, like, aside from like maybe like guns, so like your revolvers and your pistols do have certain conditions. So they have what action the gun is. So we have single action and double actions, which play a very important part from the last session where I explained that one of the mechanics in the game in gunplay is you can fan the hammer. You can only fan the hammer with a single action revolver. So it defines whether or not it's a single or double. If it's a single, you can fan the hammer, which is holding the trigger down while you're cocking the hammer back to fire the gun at rapid speed. You also have your draw modifier, which if you have a holster, you get a bonus to it. The attack modifier is the extra dice you get with the gun. And then obviously, damage is the damage you get from a single hit with the gun. If you get extra dice of hits with the gun, you stunt to either deal an extra single point of damage, or spending that money into crits. Spending those 6s in the crit. Then we have the range. So this is the optimal range of the gun. So when you get to this range, this is the number of the roll where you start losing dice per extra range you go further. And then you have some qualities, as well as the ammo you can hold, its weight, and how much it costs. So, like, a nice little Colt 1860 for $15. Good deal. And it goes into some details. Goes into some details about the rifles you can get in there. Their stuff. Then some of the melee weapons we can get. And then we go into detail of what the qualities do. And how they affect us. Which I'm not going to be covering for this Let's Learn. Because we will be here forever. Now, for the last thing of this session, which I was wanting to cover, Gamba. You can gamble in this game. More specifically, this game has a poker mechanic. So it is only for poker, but you can easily convert this into other forms of gambling. Alright, I'm just going to take a drink because my throat is really taking a pounding now. I think I've been like talking for like 2 hours now. Yep, 2 hours on the dot. And just kind of the problems for these kinds of TTRPG sessions. Hey, you could actually try and start a casino in this game. You could literally set your campaign in Vegas. So yeah, gambling was I'm not even gonna say it now. Let's move on. So running a game of cards. Obviously, you have